Painting environment. Okay, we mentioned this with two-pack paints, how it's slightly more important, but it is a massive thing. How do the pros deal with this? The pros deal with this. They have heated rooms. You'll see quite a few Thames boats on these images, and they have heated rooms, and they wheel the boat into those rooms. And they set their thermostat, it's a normal heating system with radiators. They set the thermostat to 20 degrees. And by the way, they'll all argue about this as well, whether you should be at 18 or 23 or whatever. But around those sort of temperatures, they'll set the temperature maybe 17, 18 degrees. And they'll leave the boat overnight, and they'll leave the paint in there overnight. So the air temperature, the boat temperature, and everything's the same. They've also got better dust controls in those environments and things like that. So that helps. But the reality of our world, when we're down at a boatyard, we're trying to paint our boat outside, we're trying to paint it in the garage, we're trying to paint it all over the place. So it's not so easy. We have to pick our day. Temperature is one of the biggest things. Hot and cold. First of all, heat dries paint too quickly, cold dries it too slowly. That's fairly obvious, but cold also makes our paint thicker. Hot heat actually makes our paint runnier. So you need to pick a warm day, and we need to be careful about now. One of the reasons we need to be careful about now, we've missed some of our painting well because of our current situation, but one of the reasons we have that is we get a nice sunny day, but can be quite cold overnight. So we come down on let's say a March morning, and it's a bright sunny day like it is out there today. Hopefully you've all got the sun, and you come down and you think this is a lovely day for painting. Okay, so you're going to start nice and early. Hang on a second, your boat is actually still at 2 degrees. So you can have now nice warm paint and warm environment, but the boat's at 2 degrees. So when you put that paint film on the side of the boat in a really thin film, it's going to be 2 degrees. It doesn't matter how warm your paint is, it'll be 2 degrees. So you do need to wait to the temperature to warm up. And be careful of the temperatures going up and down during the day. By the time we finish this, you'll wonder why you ever go and paint a boat, but there we go. Next consideration, humidity. Okay, humidity has a big impact, and we consider it relative humidity. We expect all professional painters to have temperature and humidity recordings. However, you probably don't in a boatyard, but you can go online. It'll tell you the humidity in Southampton, and we often ask people, so was it humid that day? Oh, it's a lovely sunny day. Well, it's a lovely sunny day in Thailand every day, but Thailand usually runs at about 95% humidity. So we all know the hot, sticky days. So humidity is not necessarily related to temperature. We also have to be careful of something called dew point, especially if you're doing keels and underwater systems. Metal will be very cold. You've got high humidity. Condensation will form on the surface, and condensation will form on the surface to the point you can't see it, but it'll still stop the paint from sticking and it'll fall off a later date. And that's why you see so much paint falling off yacht keels, because actually it's been damp because of the dew point. Couple of other things with humidity. Low humidities cause problems. Now, humidity bands that are acceptable to painting are actually quite large, but you're getting down to the 50% humidities. That's very, very dry. And if 50% humidities are really, really dry, static gets created. So when you're hand painting, that can be a nightmare. That drags dust and things into it. So be aware of that. High humidities can make your top coat come back in the morning. If you're painting late at night, humidity goes up towards the end of the day. If you're painting late at night, you can come back in the morning and your paint's dull. That's because the moisture in the air is dulled off the paint, and you'll have to sand it and redo it again. So watch the evenings and things. But your weather forecast will give you an idea, and there are local stations. If you just type in humidity in my area into Google, they'll give you an idea of what's been and what's coming. The next thing is the sun. Painting outside in boatyards and bits and pieces, the sun is a big thing. You're thinking it's lovely and warm. A lot of people don't realize if you take the hottest day we get in the UK, say let's say it's 30 degrees, direct sunlight, a white paint will get up to 60 degrees. A black will get to 135 degrees Celsius. In the Med, that's every day of the summer. So if you're trying to paint black paint with direct sunlight on a warm day, you're going to end up in trouble because the paint's going to be drying so fast, it's going to leave brush marks in it. It's just not going to flow. So the trick is just to not necessarily pick a dull day, but pick a day where, you know, depending on where your boat's situated and what point of the compass it's pointing to, can you pick a day so you start off in the shade? It doesn't matter if the sun bakes the paint after it's done its flowing, but you start off in the shade and work round so you miss the sun. It's surprisingly easy to work that one out, actually, easier than most people realize, but try not paint in direct sunlight. Last factor we need to consider is wind. Wind whips the solvent out of the paint, or thinners, or as the pros call it, juice. It takes it out very fast, so it supreme dries it. Get a combination of sun or heat and wind, and by God, the paint will dry really, really fast. So we need to watch the wind. If it's a really windy day, probably try and avoid it. Quite often, as you're putting your primer coats on, you'll deal with windy days. But when it comes to that last coat where you sanded it all down, it's looking beautiful. Probably worth picking a day where it's going to be pretty still. Also, the wind will whip up all the dust and rubbish from around the yard and try and put it in your paint job.